3 weeks after escaping Meridian Station, Jake and Zara found themselves on a small mining world called Haven's Rest. It was the kind of place where people minded their own business and did not ask too many questions about strangers. Jake had used his savings to rent a small workshop where they could work on repairing his damaged cargo ship. The bond between them had grown stronger rather than weaker during their time together. They could now share thoughts and emotions easily, and Jake found that he could push his life energy to Zara when she needed it. In return, she could share her enhanced strength and combat skills with him through their mental connection. This should not be possible, Zara said as she watched Jake work on the ship's engine. Through their bond, she was sharing her knowledge of advanced Vorthic engineering with him. Everything we know about my people says these permanent bonds are just myths. Jake paused in his work and looked at her. Over the past weeks, her appearance had changed slightly. Her pale blue skin now had a warmer tone, and the silver markings seemed brighter and more complex. She looked healthier and stronger than when he first found her. Maybe the myths were based on real events that people forgot over time, Jake suggested. Or maybe it takes the right combination of people for it to work. Perhaps. But Jake Morrison, you should know that you are changing. 2. Jake had noticed some differences in himself. He was stronger and faster than before, and his reflexes were much quicker. Sometimes when he concentrated, he could sense the emotions of other people around them, though not as clearly as he could sense Zara's thoughts. I feel different, but not in a bad way, Jake said. It is like I am becoming more than I was before. Yes, that is exactly what is happening. We are both becoming something new. They had been careful to avoid drawing attention to themselves. But news traveled fast in the outer colonies. Stories were beginning to spread about a human and a Vorthic who had destroyed a station full of hunters and escaped together. Some people called them criminals, while others saw them as symbols of hope. There are messages waiting for us, Zara said, checking the communication system. 3 more Vorthic exiles asking if the stories about us are true, and 2 human merchants who want to know if we really formed a feeding bond voluntarily. Jake was not surprised. Over the past week, they had been contacted by dozens of people from both species. Most were just curious, but some seemed genuinely interested in learning more about what they had discovered. What do you think we should tell them? Jake asked. The truth. That sometimes trust and compassion can overcome fear and prejudice. Jake smiled at her response. Through their bond, he could feel her hope for the future growing stronger each day. The scared exile he had found dying on the station was gone. In her place was a confident woman who believed she could help change the relationship between their peoples. They were interrupted by an urgent beeping. The clear zone had become a temporary home for both ships, as their crews worked around the clock to repair the damage from their passage through the asteroid field. Jake walked through the corridors of the Starbound, checking on his people and assessing their situation. The ship looked like it had been through a war, which in many ways it had. Ben wiped grease from his hands as Jake entered the engineering section. Captain, I've got good news and bad news. The good news is that I think I can get us mobile again within 12 hours. The bad news is that we're running low on everything. Power cells, hull patches, even basic medical supplies after what we shared with the Catherians. Jake nodded grimly. They had stretched their resources thin helping their former enemies, but he didn't regret the decision. Sam's reports from the Catherian ship indicated that several warriors would have died without human medical intervention. That had to count for something. Amy looked up from her tactical station where she had been monitoring long-range sensors. Captain, I'm picking up something on the edge of our sensor range. Multiple contacts, moving fast and heading this way. Jake felt his stomach drop. More Catherians coming to investigate? Or perhaps some other alien species drawn by their ship's distress signals. Can you identify them? Negative, Captain. The signatures don't match anything in our database. But Captain, there's something else. I'm detecting debris scattered across several light minutes of space. It looks like the remains of ships, both Cytherian and some other design. On the Cytherian command deck, Zexhai was receiving similar reports from her sensor operator. The approaching ships were unknown, but the debris field told a story she had hoped never to encounter in this remote region of space. She opened a communication channel to the Starbound. Captain Morrison, are your sensors detecting the approaching fleet? Jake appeared on her screen, his face grim with concern. Yes, War Prime. Amy estimates at least 6 vessels, moving at high speed. The debris suggests there was a battle here recently. Not recently, Zexhai corrected, her voice tight with something that might have been fear. That debris has been drifting for months, and I recognize some of the ship designs. Those are the remains of a Cytherian battle group that went missing 8 months ago. The implications hit Jake like a physical blow. An entire Cytherian battle group destroyed, their wreckage scattered across space like toys discarded by a giant child. Whatever was coming toward them was powerful enough to annihilate ships designed for war. War Prime, what do you know about the other ship designs in that debris field? Zexhai's 4 arms moved nervously over her controls as she studied the sensor data. The hull compositions match species from the galactic core regions. The hegemony. Jake had never heard the name before, but the way Zexhai said, it made his blood run cold. What's the hegemony? Machine intelligence. They convert organic matter into raw materials for their expansion. Every world they touch becomes a factory. Every living thing becomes fuel for their machines. The communication channel crackled with static as both ships detected massive energy signatures approaching through the asteroid field. Jake watched his tactical display as 6 enormous vessels emerged from behind a cluster of large asteroids. They were unlike anything he had ever seen, angular and brutal in their geometry, with no concession to aesthetics or comfort. They were built for one purpose: destruction. Amy's voice was tight with controlled panic. Captain, those ships are massive. Each one is at least 3 times the size of the Cytherian vessel. And Captain, they're scanning us. The lead hegemony ship transmitted a message in a flat, mechanical voice that somehow managed to convey absolute menace despite its emotionless tone. Organic vessels detected. Biological material will be harvested. Resistance is futile. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. These machines didn't want to conquer or negotiate. They simply wanted to consume everything living and turn it into more machines. It was a form of warfare so alien and absolute that it made the Cytherian attack seem almost friendly by comparison. War Prime, Jake said, opening a channel to Zexhai. I think our temporary alliance just became a lot more permanent. Zexhai looked at him with something that might have been respect in her glowing eyes. Agreed, Captain Morrison. The hegemony is a threat to all organic life. Our species. The asteroid field stretched endlessly in all directions. A maze of tumbling rocks and shifting gravitational fields that threatened to crush both ships at any moment. Jake had been awake for 36 hours straight, coordinating with the Cytherian vessel as they picked their way through the deadly obstacle course. His eyes burned with fatigue, but he couldn't rest while his crew's lives hung in the balance. On the main screen, War Prime Zexhai looked equally tired, though she hid it better. Her 4 arms moved constantly over her ship's controls, making tiny adjustments to course and speed that kept her vessel from being pulverized by the house-sized rocks that drifted past like deadly snow. Captain Morrison, her voice came through. The communication link. My ship's sensors detect a clear zone approximately 400 kilometers ahead. We should be able to rest there and make repairs. Jake nodded gratefully. Both ships had taken dozens of minor impacts from smaller asteroids, and their hulls were scored and dented from the constant bombardment. They needed time to patch the worst damage before continuing. The clear zone turned out to be a small pocket of space, where the gravitational forces had created a temporary calm in the asteroid storm. Both ships limped into the relative safety and immediately began emergency repairs. Ben emerged from the engine room, covered in grease and exhaustion. "Captain, I've got the basic life support system stabilized, but we're running on backup power for most non-essential systems. The hull breaches are sealed, but they're temporary patches at best." Dr. Hayes approached Jake's command chair with a concerned expression. "Captain, we've been monitoring Cytherian communication frequencies. Their ship took more damage than they're letting on. I'm detecting atmosphere leaks and what looks like casualties in their medical bay." Jake felt an unexpected stab of concern for his enemies. The Cytherians had fought alongside them for the past day and a half, sharing data and coordinating maneuvers with skill and precision. It was hard to remember that they had been trying to kill each other just 2 days ago. "Can we help them?" Sam Brooks, who had been treating their own injured crew members, looked up with surprise. "Captain, are you sure that's wise?" "They did try to destroy us." Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking about the choice he was about to make. Military logic said to let the enemy ship struggle with its repairs while they focused on their own survival. But something deeper, something fundamentally human, rebelled against the idea of watching people die when he could help them. "Amy, open a channel to the Cytherian ship." HFY appeared on screen, and Jake could see the strain in her posture, even though she tried to hide it. Behind her, sparks flew from damaged control panels, and he caught glimpses of crew members working frantically on repairs. "War Prime, our medical officer has detected that you have injured crew members. We're willing to share medical supplies and assistance if you need them." HFY stared at him for a long moment, her glowing eyes searching his face as if looking for some hidden trap. In Cytherian culture, offering aid to an enemy was either a sign of crushing superiority or dangerous weakness. She couldn't figure out which this human represented. "Why would you help us?" she asked finally. Jake considered his answer carefully. "Because right now, we're not enemies. We're two crews stuck in the same dangerous situation, trying to survive. My people have a saying, 'The enemy of my enemy is my friend.' Right now, our enemy is this asteroid field." On the Cytherian command deck, Kathmer leaned close to HFY and spoke in low tones. "War Prime, we have 17 crew members with serious injuries. Our medical supplies are limited, and the damage to our medical bay makes treatment difficult. Their offer could save lives." HFY felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Every decision she made affected the lives of her crew, and she had lost too many good warriors over the years to let pride prevent her from accepting help when it was offered. But accepting aid from these humans would create obligations and complications that she wasn't sure she could handle. "What do you want in return?" she asked Jake. "Nothing," Jake replied simply. "We help because we can help. That's what my people do." The concept was so alien to HFY that she almost couldn't process it. In her experience, no one did anything without expecting something in return. Power, resources, territory, advantage. There was always a price. But this human seemed to be offering genuine assistance with no strings attached. "Very well," she said after another long pause. "We accept your medical assistance. But this changes nothing between us once we escape this field." "Understood, War Prime." Within an hour, Sam Brooks and 2 medical technicians had transferred to the Cytherian ship in a small shuttle. Jake watched nervously as his people disappeared into what had been an enemy vessel just days before. He was taking an enormous risk, But something about HFY made him believe she would honor the temporary truce. Sam's first sight of the Catherian medical bay shocked him. The room was functional but harsh, with none of the comfort features that human medical facilities included. Everything was designed purely for efficiency, not patient care. The injured Catherians lay on metal tables, their violet and green skin, torn and burned from the impacts their ship had suffered. But what surprised Sam most was how quietly they bore their pain. Not one of the injured warriors complained or cried out, even those with obviously severe injuries. They watched him with curious but wary eyes as he began his work. The Catherian medical officer, a female named Healer Vextu, worked alongside Sam with professional efficiency. She was smaller than most Catherians, but moved with the same precise grace. At first, she watched Sam's techniques with suspicion, but as she saw how effective his treatments were, her attitude began to shift. "Your methods are different," she observed as Sam used human surgical techniques to repair damage to a warrior's chest. "You spend much time on patient comfort. Is this not inefficient?" Sam looked up from his work. Comfortable patients heal faster. When people aren't in pain, their bodies can focus energy on recovery instead of dealing with suffering. The concept seemed to fascinate Vex too. In Catherian culture, pain was seen as a test of strength. Warriors were expected to endure injury without complaint as proof of their worthiness. But Sam's approach suggested that eliminating pain might actually make warriors stronger, not weaker. Meanwhile, on both ships, other crew members began to interact in small ways. Tony Martinez found himself working with Catherian security forces to coordinate the medical transfer. The Catherian security chief, War Second Deximer, was initially hostile, but gradually became intrigued by human security protocols. "You trust your crew members with sensitive information," Deximer observed as they discussed communication security. "In our military, information is restricted based on rank and need." Tony nodded. "We found that people fight better when they understand what they're fighting for. Trust builds loyalty, and loyal crew members are more effective than fearful ones." The idea clearly challenged Deximer's worldview, but Jake could see him considering it seriously. Dr. Hayes found herself in extended conversation with Kethmer about navigation techniques and sensor technology. The Catherian science officer was brilliant, with a deep understanding of physics and engineering that impressed her. But his approach was purely practical, focused on immediate tactical applications. "You study these asteroid compositions for knowledge alone?" Kethmer asked as Hayes ran detailed scans of nearby rocks. "There is no immediate tactical advantage?" "Understanding leads to better decisions in the future," Hayes explained. "The more we know about how things work, the better prepared we are for unexpected situations." Kethmer's 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed this concept. Catherians focused on gathering intelligence for specific military purposes. The idea of pursuing knowledge for its own sake was almost incomprehensible to him, but he could see the potential value in the approach. On the Starbound's bridge, Jake found himself in increasingly frequent communication with HFY as they planned their route through the remaining asteroid field. She was a remarkable commander, he realized. Quick-thinking, decisive, and absolutely committed to her crew's welfare. In different circumstances, he thought they might have been allies instead of enemies. "Your people seem very different from mine," HFY said during one of their planning sessions. "You make decisions based on the welfare of individuals, rather than the strength of the group." Jake considered this. "We believe the group is only as strong as the individuals in it. Take care of people, and they'll take care of each other. And if individuals are weak, if they cannot contribute to the group's strength, then we help them become stronger. Everyone has something to offer if you give them the chance." HFY fell silent for several minutes, clearly thinking about his words. In Catherian society, weakness was eliminated quickly and efficiently. The strong survived and reproduced, while the weak were discarded. It was a harsh system, but it had made the Catherians one of the most powerful military forces in the galaxy. But watching the human crew work together, she could see a different kind of strength. They supported each other, compensated for individual weaknesses, and created something greater than the sum of their parts. It was a fascinating concept, even if it seemed dangerously idealistic. War Prime Zexhai stood on the command deck of her warship and studied the strange vessel that had dared to enter Catherian space without permission. The alien ship was smaller than hers, and clearly built for purposes other than war. Its hull was smooth and rounded where hers was angular and armored. Its weapons were weak, barely scratching her shields when they fired. But something about it troubled her. The aliens inside that ship fought with unexpected skill. When she had opened fire, expecting them to panic or surrender, they had instead maneuvered with precision and returned fire immediately. Their tactics were sound even if their weapons were not. They moved their ship like warriors who had seen real combat before. Zexhai was tall, even for a Catherian female, standing nearly 7 feet in height. Her violet-scaled skin gleamed under the lights at the command deck, and her forearms moved with fluid grace as she worked the controls. She had fought her way up through the ranks of the Catherian military in a society where showing weakness meant death. Her people respected only strength, and she had proven hers in dozens of battles across the galaxy. Subprime Kethmer, her science officer, approached with data tablets in 2 of his hands. He was shorter than Zexhai, but broader, his green scales marked with the scars that showed his own combat experience. War Prime, the solar flare has disabled our primary weapon systems. It will take time to bring them back online. Zexhai growled low in her throat. The timing was suspicious. Just as she was about to destroy the alien intruders, the star itself had intervened. In her culture, such things were seen as omens. But omens of what? How long? She demanded. Perhaps an hour, War Prime. The flare overloaded many systems. We must rebuild the power matrices carefully or risk permanent damage. Zexhai studied the alien ship on her main display. It was drifting slightly, clearly as damaged as her own vessel. Good. That meant they could not escape while their weapons were down. When her guns were ready, she would finish what she had started. But first, she wanted to understand these aliens better. They had fought well for such a weak species. Perhaps they would provide useful intelligence about other potential threats in this region of space. On the bridge of the Starbound, Jake watched Ben work frantically at the engineering station. Sparks flew from damaged circuits as the chief engineer tried to bring their systems back online. The solar flare had been both blessing and curse, stopping the alien attack but also making their own situation worse. How bad is it, Ben? Jake asked. Ben wiped sweat from his forehead and shook his head. The jump drive took a direct hit before. The flare, Captain. Even without the electromagnetic damage, we're looking at days of repair work. Maybe weeks. And that's if we had a proper shipyard and all the parts we need. Amy looked up from her tactical station. Captain, I'm detecting movement in the asteroid field beyond the 4th planet. The gravitational fluctuations from the solar flare are causing shifts in the orbits. Some of those rocks are big, Captain, really big. Jake pulled up the asteroid field data on his command screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. The field contained thousands of asteroids, some the size of small moons. The solar flare had disrupted the delicate gravitational balance that kept them in stable orbits. Now they were moving, slowly at first, but gaining speed as they fell toward the inner system. And both ships were directly in their path. Dr. Hayes looked up from her science station with alarm in her eyes. Captain, at their current rate of acceleration, the largest asteroids will reach our position in approximately 18 hours. We need to move now. Jake felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. They couldn't jump. They couldn't outrun asteroids the size of mountains. And their enemy was still out there waiting to resume the fight. He had to make a decision that could save his crew or doom them all. Amy, can you get a communication channel to the alien ship? Amy's fingers flew over her controls. I can try, Captain. Their communication systems seem to be working even if their weapons aren't. Jake took a deep breath. What he was about to do went against every instinct he had as a former military officer. You didn't ask your enemies for help. But these weren't normal circumstances, and his crew's survival was more important than his pride. Open a channel. The main screen flickered, and then showed the interior of the alien ship. Jake found himself looking at a creature that was both beautiful and terrifying. She was tall and graceful, with purple skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. She had 4 arms and eyes that glowed with intelligence and barely controlled fury. This was clearly a predator, built for war and violence. But when she spoke, her voice was clear and strong, translated by their universal language protocols. I am War Prime Zexhai of the Ketherian Empire. You have violated our territory and will be destroyed. Surrender now, and your deaths will be quick. Jake kept his voice steady, despite the fear that was trying to claw its way up his throat. War Prime. Zexhai, I am Captain Jake Morrison. We didn't know this was your territory. We came here seeking knowledge, not conflict. But right now, we have a bigger problem than our fight. Zexhai's eyes narrowed. Explain. Jake gestured to his science. Officer. D.R. Hayes quickly transmitted the asteroid field data to the alien ship. Those asteroids are on a collision course with both our vessels. Neither of our ships can survive an impact with rocks that size. We need to work together to get out of their way. On the Ketherian ship, Kethmer studied the data and confirmed what the humans had discovered. War Prime. Their calculations are correct. The asteroids will destroy both ships if we remain here. Zexhai felt anger and frustration war within her chest. These weak aliens were trying to trick her into lowering her guard. But the data was clear, and her own officers confirmed the threat. To ignore, it would mean the death of her crew and the loss of her ship. What do you propose, human? She said finally. Jake had been thinking quickly while the aliens examined the data. Your ship is faster and more maneuverable than ours, but our navigation computers are more advanced. If we share navigation data and coordinate our movements, we might be able to find a safe path through the asteroid field. Zexhai laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. You want me to trust enemies who invaded our space? War Prime, with respect, we're all going to be dead in 18 hours if we don't work together. We can go back to trying to kill each other after we're safe. The honesty of the statement surprised Zexhai. In Ketherian culture, deception and the end. Misdirection were common tactics. But this human spoke plainly about their situation and his intentions. It was either refreshing or another form of trickery she didn't understand. Kethmer approached her command station. War Prime, I have analyzed their ship's capabilities. Their sensor array is indeed more sophisticated than ours for navigation purposes. Their tactical systems are weak, but their ability to plot safe courses through dangerous space is superior. Zexhai considered her options. She could refuse to cooperate and hope that her ship's superior speed and armor would be enough to survive the asteroid bombardment. But the largest rocks were moving fast, and there were so many of them. Even if her ship survived, it would likely be too damaged to continue fighting. Or she could accept this temporary alliance with the aliens and use their expertise to escape the trap. Then, once they were safe, she could resume the battle on her own terms. Very well, Human Morrison. We will share navigation data. But understand this clearly. Once we are clear of the asteroids, we return to being enemies. I will show no mercy then." Jake nodded grimly. "Understood, War Prime." "Amy, establish a secure data link with their ship. Dr. Hayes, I want you working directly with their science officer to plot the safest course." Over the next several hours, the two crews worked together in an atmosphere of tense cooperation. The Catherian ship took the lead, using its superior speed and maneuverability to scout ahead while the Starbound's computers calculated the constantly changing positions of thousands of asteroids. Tony Martinez coordinated with Catherian security forces to establish communication protocols. He found their approach to security fascinating and terrifying. They seemed to assume that everyone was a potential threat and planned accordingly. Ben worked with Catherian engineers to share technical specifications. He was amazed by their power, generation systems, and weapon technology, while they seemed interested in human approaches to system redundancy and damage control. As they navigated deeper into the asteroid field, Jake found himself in almost constant communication with Zexhai. She was clearly an experienced commander, making quick decisions and adapting to changing conditions with skill that impressed him. What surprised him was that she seemed to be evaluating him as well. She asked questions about human tactics and decision-making processes that went beyond what was necessary for their current cooperation. The asteroids grew larger and more numerous as they progressed. Several times, both ships had to execute emergency maneuvers to avoid collisions with rocks the size of office buildings. The Catherian ship moved like a dancer, graceful and precise. The Starbound was less elegant, but showed remarkable endurance, taking minor impacts that would have disabled other vessels. As they worked together, Jake began to see that the Catherians were not merely aggressive for the sake of. Jake woke on the third morning to find Lyra standing motionless near his window, staring out at the stars. The dark patterns on her skin had faded considerably during the night, and her pupils were no longer completely dilated. For the first time since she had arrived at his door, she looked almost like a normal person, rather than someone driven by biological imperatives. "Your rut cycle is ending, isn't it?" Jake asked quietly. Lyra turned to face him, and he saw something in her expression that had not been there before. Uncertainty, perhaps, or maybe embarrassment. "Yes, the biological drives are receding. I am beginning to think clearly again." Jake sat up in bed and studied her face. "Are you okay? You look like you're not sure how to feel about what happened." "Here, I am experiencing what your people might call mixed emotions. Part of me is satisfied that I have found a suitable mate, but another part is concerned about the implications of my choice." Jake got up and moved to his,